The Inuit people have always been fishers and hunters. Still to this day, they hunt whales, walruses, caribou, seal, and polar bears, along with birds, fish, and at times the Arctic fox, but it's less common than the others. Their diet is very high in protein and extremely high in fat. With a traditional diet, they consume an average of 75% of daily energy intake just from fat alone. It isn't really possible to cultivate plants for food in the Arctic, but they gather those that are naturally available, such as grasses, tubers, roots, stems, berries, and seaweed. They are collected and usually preserved depending on the season and the location that they are in. However, they've had a variety of hunting technologies over the years that they've used to gather food. The Inuits have a low carbohydrate diet and it does not have an adverse effect on their health. They are capable of getting necessary vitamins needed from their traditional winter diet, which had no plant matter. Vitamin C could be obtained from items that they need from their traditional diet of raw meat, such as the ring seal liver and whale skin, as nasty as that sounds. There have been skepticism of the Inuits having lifespans for 12 to 15 years shorter than the average Canadian, which was thought to be a result of the limited medical services. The life expectancy gap is not closing. Their educational system has flourished in the region of Nunavik for the last 4,000 years. Through the years, their educational process has basically been all that was necessary to survive and perpetuate the Inuit culture. Carried out informally by parents, relatives, and peers, their educational system included teaching and learning through imitation. There was no specific time for completion, though. The child would then move on to the next skill level when he or she was ready.
The Canadian Arctic is one of the coldest and most unforgiving environments on Earth. Winters are long and cold, often with little light. The subsoil, even close to the surface, stays frozen year-round. In the far north, there are even periods of complete darkness during the winter, sometimes for months at a time when the sun does not rise. There are frequent windstorms which cause blowing snow and large snowdrifts along the barren landscape. In the very northern areas, near the North Pole, there are periods of continuous sunlight when the sun never fully sets. The temperature is nearly always at freezing or below freezing for the Inuit people because they mostly live above the tree line. The largest populations of Inuit people live in Barrow, Alaska, Greenland, and Canada. The Inuit people deal with harsh conditions nearly year-round. Therefore, the people of the Arctic are forced to adapt to the harsh surroundings in order to survive. The word Inuit is the term that is preferred when speaking of the people rather than the term Eskimo. Many people of the Inuit tribe find the term Eskimo to be offending because it translates to mean eaters of raw flesh that derived from the Algonquin people of North America. Large majorities of Inuit people believe in animalism, basically that every living and non-living thing or creature has a spirit. Whether you're a human, an animal, a force of nature, or an inanimate object, you have a spirit. The belief was that humans were made of three parts: a body, a name, and a soul. When a person died, it was only the body that died. The spirit and the name could continue living in a new body. The names of dead relatives are given to babies, ensuring that the soul and name could continue living. They also believe that whenever the object with the spirit passed away, that they passed away to another world, the spirit world. In the Inuit religion, there are people who are powerful enough to control the spirits, and they were called shamans, or angakоks. These people use charms and dances as a means to communicate with the spirit world after people had passed on. These people also wore carved masks to represent animals while performing their rituals. They believed the masks helped them to better communicate with the spirit world. To please the spirits, the shamans would make recommendations about offering gifts to the spirits and would fine people for breaking rules that would anger the spirits. Bad weather, illnesses, and a bad hunt were all blamed on displeased spirits. There were certain rules of the spirit world that had to be followed. 5 sacred rules make up the rules of the spirit world. Women were not allowed to sew caribou skins inside of igloos on sea ice during the winter. The Inuit people did not eat sea mammal and land mammal meat at the same meal. A knife used for killing whales had to be wrapped in seal skin, not caribou skin. After killing a seal, melted snow had to be dripped into its mouth to quench the spirit's thirst. The Inuit saved the bladder of the hunted animals because the belief was that the spirit was found inside of the bladder. Lastly, one of the goddesses of the Inuit people, maybe the most important goddess of the Inuit people, was Sedna, the goddess of the sea. She lived at the bottom of the sea and protected animals like seal and whales. They believed that if they pleased Sedna, that she would continue providing them with food.
Although most contemporary Inuit people live indoors and wear store-bought clothing, garments made of watertight skins and furs enabled early Inuit people to survive in the bitter cold climate. Construction of traditional Inuit clothing required highly developed skills passed down from generation to generation. Garments were often decorated with shells, stones, ivory beads, or small animal bones. The Inuit people relied on anoraks, knee-length outer garments, much like parkas, to keep them warm. Although anoraks and pants were sometimes made from skin of polar bears, fox, or wolves, they were usually constructed of caribou skin because the short, hollow hairs of the animal made warm, lightweight garments. The thickness of a caribou pelt depends on the season, which allowed the Inuit people to make anoraks suitable for each time of year. Women's had apron-like flaps in front and back, as well as a baby pouch called an amulet, which kept an infant next to his mother's skin. The roomy shoulders of men's allowed freedom of motion for hunting. Garments made of waterproof sealskin were often worn during warmer weather, often Inuits dressed in layers. One garment with the fur facing the skin was covered by an anorak with the fur facing outward. Although the women usually wore pants made of only one layer, men's pants consisted of 2 layers to keep them warm on long hunting expeditions. Pants and anoraks where single layers were sufficient during warmer weather. The Inuit were nomadic people, so they rarely stayed in one place for very long. Therefore, their houses had to be quick and easy to build. During the summer, the Inuit built tents out of driftwood or poles covered with animal skin, mostly caribou or sealskin. These tents were not unlike the plains teepees. A ring of boulders around the base held down the tent covering. Since wood was so hard to come by, the wooden poles used to make the tents were jealously guarded. People from different areas would form large villages during the summer. In the winter, everyone scattered across the land into small bands again. During the winter, Inuit families would follow the hunt. They needed a shelter that would keep them warm and protect them from the harsh, warm winter weather. The most common winter shelter was a snow house, more commonly known as an igloo. An igloo was a temporary dome-shaped shelter made out of a snow block. The blocks were cut from the snow and piled in a spiral shape, leaning in slightly. This gave the igloo its dome shape. Soft snow was used to fill any holes and extra insulation. Depending on the size of the igloo, it usually took the Inuit 20 to 30 minutes to build. Larger, more permanent igloos could reach 4 meters in diameter and 3 meters in height. Sleeping platforms were made of ice blocks covered with fur.
Well, I'm going to talk about the Inuit government. The Canadian Inuit are represented by Inuit Teprarit Kanatami, which means Inuits are united in Canada at the national level. Formerly known as Inuit Tapariset of Canada, ITC. The ITK was created in 1971 to help bring the Inuit of Canada together in asserting their rights to sovereignty and governance over traditional Inuit lands. There are no treaties signed with the Inuit, although Inuit have signed 5 modern land claims with the government of Canada as early as 1975. Now I'm going to talk about the Inuit social norms. The lifestyle in the past was very different than what it is now. A young man could only hope to be a skilled hunter and provide for his family, and a woman could only hope to strive to be a good seamstress and a household manager. The gender roles were very important to them, and they were influenced by their parents because they didn't really have any peers, because they had high infant mortality rates, and the residential units were too small. And in the past, the parents made the marriage arrangements while they were teenagers. But the young men were not considered old enough for marriage until they had proven themselves as hunters and providers. Until they could build a snow house and hunt their own food, they couldn't be eligible for marriage. And usually it would be about 17 or 18 that they would get married. Then they had to go live with their father-in-law and work with him for about 3 to 4 years before they could even marry. But it's changed a lot now. They used to spend their time hunting and trapping in small, isolated groups. But now they go to school and they spend more time on social activities rather than just work.